Well, to talk more about this extremely eventful day for the Ottawa Senators, here's our hockey insider, Chris Johnston. CJ, Michael Andlauer, wow. I mean, this guy did not hold back on Wednesday, using words like embarrassed and negligent. But he did call the loss of the first-round pick a very strong price to pay, and I think a lot of people would agree with him. Why was it so important for the NHL to make this punishment so severe, CJ?
Well, this was a serious offense when all is said and done, and it might look like a technicality for those of us on the outside, but, you know, the Senators were found, and Pierre Dorion specifically in this case, to have been not upfront about the conditions of a trade. During that trade, the league processed the original Dadonov move on that information. It put the league and the teams, both the Vegas Golden Knights and Anaheim Ducks, ultimately in a bad situation where they thought they were going to create a deal. Each of them both announced it back at the 2022 trade deadline. You can find the tweets. They're still up from those clubs thinking they had a trade, and that ultimately had to be rescinded. And so this was sort of a black eye on the league, on those teams. And I think ultimately the Senators didn't follow the rules. And so if you look across time, you know, once upon a time, Ilya Kovalchuk cost the New Jersey Devils a first-round pick for illegal contract structure. The Arizona Coyotes got dinged for one when they were illegally testing out prospects. This is kind of the price to be paid for a major offense, and ultimately that's what this was.
And the NHL, very thorough, CJ, a 73-page report at the end of the day. However, Michael Andlauer says that the league didn't advise him about the botched Dadonov no-trade clause or the Shane Pinto sports betting incident before he closed on the sale of the Senators, which seems like something they probably should have done. Do you think that information could have potentially changed this transaction?
I don't think it would have changed it. I mean, certainly that's information Michael Andlauer made quite clear he wished he had when he was going through the process to buy the Ottawa Senators. He mentioned that the sellers, you know, did bring up the Dadonov situation, but they thought it was a non-issue. So he didn't have any belief at that time it would become a first-round pick that he would be forfeiting. But, you know, this is akin to if you're out trying to buy a house and you don't like the color of the paint in the living room. I think you ultimately live with it because, you know, there's enough other things, enough positive aspects of the sale. And, you know, Michael Andlauer has wanted to own an NHL team outright for a long time. He was a minority owner with the Montreal Canadiens. These teams don't come up for sale too often. I still think ultimately he would have wanted the Ottawa Senators to the same degree he did. But, you know, that's information he wished he had because he feels as though a little bit as time's gone on and, you know, 40 days or so since this sale closed that he's had a couple surprises there that he wasn't anticipating.
CJ, Andlauer said that Pierre Dorion's actions embarrassed the league and angered two other NHL clubs. Do you believe that this was the final straw that sealed Dorion's fate?
Absolutely. You know, there was no coming back from this, I don't think. And you know, when Steve Staios was brought in as the president of the team at the time, Michael Andlauer talked about wanting to have sort of a two-headed monster in his hockey operations department. I think if at that point he was inclined to make a change at GM, it would have been easy to do it then. And so to do this so quickly after, I mean, we're basically a month later here that this is happening, is a reflection that this is a piece of information, a decision, and ultimately what's contained in that 73-page report the NHL shared with Michael Andlauer, that he felt that it was time that things had to move on. And so he had the faithful dinner on Tuesday night in which they essentially sealed the terms of Pierre Dorion's release, his termination. But, you know, I just don't think that there's any coming back from this because it is a big penalty. I mean, as much as this is the sort of, you know, is in line with other sort of indiscretions of the past, to lose a first-round pick is very punitive. I mean, for a team where Ottawa's at, usually that's the price of getting in on say, big trades at the deadline. That's something maybe they're not going to be able to do to the same degree in one of these next couple seasons because of this. And so ultimately that cost Pierre Dorion his job.
So, Chris, Steve Staios will take over on an interim basis as the GM. He said Wednesday that he'll oversee the day-to-day operations as president and GM. So he's going to manage the big picture as president and then manage the team as well. Where do you think this team goes from here, though?
Well, he might have to manage all those things at once. You know, I think for the balance of the season, that's not a timeline the Senators have laid out at this point. I think really their focus, because a lot's happened in a short amount of time here, really a week from when they first learned of where this was going to the fact Pierre Dorion would be out, is that they want to take their time and make sure that they're talking to the right candidates, making the right decision. And, you know, it just might take out of a fact, you know, function of how things operate in the NHL, until the offseason, until they can talk to everyone they'd want to. And so, Staios is certainly capable, I believe, of navigating them through this next little bit. And, wouldn't surprise me in the least if it's not really until next, summer at some point when they're naming a new general manager. In the meantime, when we start looking at candidates, I'll point you to the fact that Michael Andlauer was part of Montreal's search committee when they ended up hiring Kent Hughes a couple years ago. During that process, they interviewed someone like Matthew Darche, the assistant GM in Tampa. I think that's a name that will likely be connected to this job at some point in the future. There's a few others that were part of that Canadiens process. I think will have some appeal to the Senators, but the bottom line here is I just don't think it's going to happen on an accelerated basis.
So, Chris, as you know, this is a young team. I mean, say what you will about Pierre Dorion, but he's assembled a talented young team for sure. Now, they're 4-4 right now. They're 7th in the Atlantic. How do you think a team this young handles this particular situation? And, they've had a few other things. The Pinto situation, it's been a bit of a rocky start. How do you think they handle this in the dressing room?
This might be one of those cases where youth is a positive in a sense. I think when you're a young player in the league, you're not always, you're aware that there's a general manager and all that stuff, but I don't know that this necessarily filters into the dressing room. Now, the Pinto matter's a different one because that was potentially a teammate that was going to be joining the team, had he reached the contract at any given moment. And so you're right, it's been sort of a tumultuous start to the year. They've had some injuries on top of these off-ice kind of situations, even a change in ownership. There's some new personnel around working for the team. All of a sudden, Daniel Alfredsson's back out there, franchise legend. So I do think it has been a lot to deal with, but I'm of the opinion that being a young team probably is a good thing in this case, because I don't think Tim Stützle or Brady Tkachuk, I don't think they're sitting around thinking about this as much as we are, and I'm just guessing they're looking forward to their next game and getting out there and doing what they do on the ice.
And their next game will be Thursday night when they host a very talented Los Angeles Kings team. Chris Johnston, our insider, thanks for this. This is great. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.